Okay. All right. Thank you for showing up. This initially was planned as a 4-part series, and then I realized one of the weeks was Yom Ha'atzmaut, and one of the weeks was the CGS play, and so I had to, a very long prophetic career into just 2 lessons, and we may not get to we're not going to get to the very end of the book. But we'll try to cover most of the story, and again, try to understand his life, as we did last week, in some historical context. I don't know if any of you had a chance to see if you weren't here, a chance to see the videos. Okay, so at least one, great. Okay, so you're all welcome to follow, to watch the video. I have a map here, so we can also have some orientation geographically. Just to review, Yirmiyahu's prophetic career begins in the reign of King Yoshiyahu. Yoshiyahu was, the last good king who takes advantage of a power vacuum between Egypt and Assyria to kind of pretend that he's an independent king and can do his own, have his own policy and kind of rule his kingdom. He even expands a little bit into the north, he leaves the boundaries of Judah and goes into Israel and tries to recreate the kingdom of David. And he breaks with the decades, 55-year tradition of his predecessor Manasseh in turning away from Assyrian religion, Assyrian culture, being essentially a province of Assyria. Again, the Assyrian Empire is destabilized, and he has his independence. Now, what happens? The tragic end of Yoshiyahu, Josiah, he tries to, delusions of grandeur perhaps, he tries to play a role in this sort of global or regional politics between Egypt, Assyria, and Babylonia, and gets himself killed, right? So you look at the map, just recall, right, there's Eretz Yisrael along the coast, in between Egypt to the south, Assyria to the north, and then just farther along with the Fertile Crescent, right, because Arabia was sort of not so populated, but you have the Mesopotamia, and there's Babylonia, right, and then just north there's Assyria, okay, that's also the Euphrates continues up there, and then along the coast, right, the coast of Palestine is also a place where people live, and then Egypt, right, the gift of the Nile is also very populated. So he found himself, the Egyptians were allies of the Assyrians, and Pharaoh Necho goes across the north of the Galil to intervene on behalf of his ally, the Assyrians, who are being attacked by the Babylonians, and Yoshiyahu intervenes. So we talked about this last week. Maybe he intervenes because why is this army marching across my kingdom? The Gemara seems to think that's what it is. The Rabbi saw it as he thought the brachot of that God promised in Sefer Vayikra that a sword should not pass through our land, so that should pertain, that I should be protected by that bracha, and I'm not going to allow this army to march through my territory. Or maybe he saw himself as an ally of Babylonia, and he was the enemy of my enemy, right? He saw Babylonians were the ones who had destabilized the Assyrians, and they were the ones who gave him that room to have a semblance of independence, and so he wanted to stop the Egyptians from intervening and on behalf of the Assyrians. Either way, Pharaoh Necho kills him at Megiddo, Har Megiddo, right? Armageddon, in the first battle of Armageddon, in the Galil, kills him. It seems the sources we saw, it wasn't even it was like a second, like you swat a fly, but it wasn't, and he goes on his way up to fight. So what happened next? So look at the next source. Look at 2 Kings 23 on page 2. Okay, so his servants conveyed his body from Megiddo to Yerushalayim. They buried him in a tomb. Then the people of the land, they took Yehoachaz, that was his son, so he's put as a king in his place. Yehoachaz was 23 years old when he became king. He reigned 3 months in Yerushalayim, only 3-month reign. He was displeasing to the Lord just as his father's had done. We don't really know what he could have done. But what happened? Pharaoh Necho comes back. So he goes up 3 months later. He returns from his military campaign. And he's like, okay, now it's time to, what do you call it? Pacify my rear, like my supply chain has to be secured. I can't be in this military campaign fighting the Babylonians up in the north when I have this pesky Judean kingdom, attacking my army. So he returns to Jerusalem, where this Judean kingdom, caused him trouble, and he takes the king, who the son of the king who attacked him, and he puts him in prison, and finds the kingdom, and then he takes one of his brothers, one of the other sons of Yoshiyahu, his name was Eliakim, and puts him in control. Okay, Lamed Daled. V'yamlech Pharaoh necho et Eliakim ben Yoshiyahu tachat Yoshiyahu aviv. V'yasev et shemo Yehoyakim, changes his name to show that I'm the one whom he answers to. Right, giving a name in Tanakh is a sign of dominance and authority. So Yehoyakim, he had a name that was given to him by his father, but Pharaoh changes his name to Yehoyakim. V'yet Yehoachaz lakach v'yeho Mitzrayim v'yamet sham. So then Yehoachaz, the son, the first anointed king, son of Yoshiyahu, he takes with him to Egypt as prisoner. He dies in Egypt. So the king, Yehoyakim, is a king. He owes his crown to Egypt, and he's essentially. And then it says, and then Yehoyakim gave Pharaoh the silver and the gold, and he made an assessment of the land to pay the money demanded of Pharaoh. He exacted from the people of the land the silver and the gold to be paid Pharaoh Necho according to each man's assessment. So he pays an annual tax to Pharaoh Necho. He owes his crown to Pharaoh Necho. His kingdom is a province of Egypt. That's Yehoyakim. So Menashe, the grandfather, his kingdom was a province of Assyria. As the Assyrian Empire stumbles and there's a power vacuum, Yoshiyahu gets to pretend that he's an independent king, and then he's squashed by Egypt. Pharaoh Necho puts his own man on the throne, and Judah is essentially a province of Egypt, which would have been fine. Okay, but I think that one of the problems of Yehoyakim is that he took it too seriously, and he became very loyal, pro-Egyptian. Right, that faction really meant a lot. That being part of that orientation meant a lot to him, and he came to trust Egypt more than he should have, it seems. And he was also a pretty wicked person. However, he was wicked in a distinct way. He did not, it seems, return to the idolatry of his grandfather from the time of Menashe. It seems that the dedication to only worshiping one God and the obeying the religion of the Torah, that was entrenched and did not change when Yehoyakim was king. But he had no deeper faith in God and was not willing to accept the guidance of Yirmiyahu, and there was a real lack of justice. Okay, this was a society that was superficially religious, but was a corrupt society and an oppressive society. And Yirmiyahu, confronting this new king, Yirmiyahu again, who really had respect for Yoshiyahu, who was inspired by his vision, who wept for him when he dies, who mourns him, gives a hesped, eulogizes the dead king. It was the last great hope in Yirmiyahu's eyes. And Yehoyakim, it's a very different relationship. So his first, chapter 22, we have a prophecy of Yirmiyahu against Yehoyakim. He who builds his house with unfairness and his upper chambers with injustice, who makes his fellow man work without pay and does not give him his wages, who thinks, I will build me a vast palace with spacious upper chambers provided with windows, paneled in cedar, painted with vermilion. Do you think you are more a king because you compete in cedar? Is that what makes you a king? You have more wood paneling in your palace? Your father ate and drank and dispensed justice and equity. So yeah, your father had a good, he was a king, he got to eat good food, but he also did justice. And that's what made him a successful king. Then all went well. He upheld the rights of the poor and needy, then all was well. That is truly heeding me, declares the Lord, but your eyes and your mind are only on ill-gotten gains, on shedding the blood of the innocent, on committing fraud and violence. That's Yehoyakim. So there wasn't a return to the true idolatry as it existed in the time of Menashe. He thought that he was a strong king. He has the Egyptian empire is supporting me. I'm a loyal servant of the Egyptian king, and my province is a fruitful, tax-paying province of the Egyptian king. That gives him a security that strengthens my throne, and he has a lavish palace. There are archaeologists who think they may have identified a palace of Yehoiakim. It's near Ramat Rachel, so a little bit outside the city, like in the country, like a little country palace he had outside of the city, and wood panels, cedar, luxury, right? But there was no justice. It was an oppressive society, and the king was at the top of that. And not only was the king, was Yirmiyahu told to speak against the king, he also spoke against the Beit HaMikdash. And if you look at Jeremiah 26, at the beginning of the reign of Yehoiakim, son of Yoshiyahu, king of Judah, this word came from the Lord to say, "Thus said the Lord, stand in the court of the house of the Lord. Go to the Beit HaMikdash, and speak to the men of all the towns of Judah who are coming to worship in the house of the Lord, all the words which I command you to speak to them. Do not omit anything." It's a big holiday. Can you imagine, right? I think it's like, it's Kol Nidre night. Everyone comes to shul, okay? And, the prophet gets up, and, right, I had my first year in yeshiva, a very prominent rabbi said, your sermons on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur should be like, motherhood and apple pie, like the Jewish equivalent of motherhood and apple pie. You should make people feel good about coming to shul, they feel good about being Jewish, and just validate, they're sitting, but don't, this is the time of the year just to just be, you should, say something inspiring and intellectually stimulating, but it should be the messages should be really just affirming and feel good, because they're coming to shul and everyone's here and every seat is full. You just make people feel good about that. That was not Yirmiyahu's message. Okay, his style was different. So say to them, speak to them, perhaps they'll listen and turn back each from his evil way, that I may renounce the punishment I bring upon them for their wicked acts. Okay, say to them, if you don't listen to me, says the Lord, listen to the prophets. I've sent you all these prophets. You don't listen to them. I will make this house what was Shiloh? Shiloh, you may recall, was the shrine, right? Before the Beit HaMikdash was built, the Ark of the Covenant was in Shiloh, and Shiloh was destroyed by the Plishtim. So it was like the place before Yerushalayim where the Ark had rested, and it was destroyed. The Ark didn't protect the city, okay? It didn't protect its own resting place. And Yerushalayim is no different. So Yirmiyahu was speaking against the king, he's speaking against the Beit HaMikdash, he's going against all of the symbols of people's patriotic, sense of self and sense of identity, that the king in his beautiful palace is, like the cedar, the wealth, the ornamentation of your palace doesn't make you more a king. Doesn't protect your kingdom. And and he says the basic thing, this building, God's resting place that you think, is going to protect you, it won't. The Beit HaMikdash is meaningless if the society is unjust. If you don't listen to the prophets, it's going to be destroyed. The city will be destroyed. Yerushalayim will be destroyed, right? People, they think of it then as now, right? Certain, Yerushalayim has resonance, right? It's as a symbol, and to get up and say, this is going to be destroyed. If you don't listen, you don't dramatically change what you're doing, everything you hold dear, everything you think will protect you, right? That God would never let how would God let his own house be destroyed? He already did it once. He destroyed Shiloh. And he'll do this city too, will become a desolate place if you don't change your way. So needless to say, this was not a very popular message. Yeah.
How did he get his message out, and what was his, is that his job to be a prophet? And what was he,
how did he get his money?
How did he get his money? How did he have his time? And how did he get his message out?
I think he just got up and he must have had some, I don't know, he must have, it seems from, it's a very good question, it seems he had people who believed in him, who supported him. There were scribes he worked with who, right, so there must have been, maybe he had patrons as well who, gave him some food, let him sleep in their home.
Was he some sort of like
Could have had,
child of an aristocrat or something?
he was a Cohen family from Anatot, so he could have had, in his village, his hometown, he could have had, when he went home, Anatot is, north of Yerushalayim, like kind of between Yerushalayim and Ramallah. So he could have, he went home and he had his cousin let him sleep in the attic, and he had, he gave him some food. You don't have the sense he had like a household that he was maintaining. He just, he probably had the kindness of people who give him a place to sleep and a place to eat.
Would you also, could he be characterized as like a preacher too? Would he like go and...
Yeah, these prophecies were, I gave you a short excerpt, some of them are very long.
So he was like standing on the corner?
I imagine him standing up and sort of proclaiming, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how I imagine. And then sometimes he worked with scribes who would write out, that's how I imagine it. He knew from the beginning that he wouldn't be successful, right? The very first prophecy, evil is coming from the north, it's not going to work. And here again, in this prophecy he gives in the Beit Midrash, he says, listen, all the prophets have been coming, I send you prophets, you don't listen to them. So that's sort of an interesting question, what's the purpose of the prophet? Because it doesn't seem like they had any impact, any of them. The only prophet who had a dramatic impact in his prophetic message? Yonah, yeah. Yonah is the one I was thinking of, right? Yonah goes to Nineveh and he says, 30 days Nineveh will be destroyed, and everyone says, okay, got to change everything, right? So it's been suggested that the book of Yonah, it's almost like a parody, because you have, for hundreds of years, you have these incredible prophets speaking in beautiful language, like the most glorious poetry, ever written, and, generation after generation, and they have zero impact. And Yonah comes, wanders into Nineveh smelling like a fish and says, 30 days, Nineveh will be destroyed, and the king gets off his throne. Everyone's, so it's an interesting, so it's almost like a parody, right? It's
They wouldn't be called prophets or prophecy wouldn't have the definition that it does now if more of them listened to, right?
We use the word prophetic to mean, by definition, right? We say, it's a prophetic, message, meaning, you see things that nobody else sees, and that's what makes it prophetic. But I don't know if that had to be part of the definition, right? Maybe prophetic, right? So it's interesting, like religious question. What is and we actually talked about it. According to Maimonides, in his rationalist conception of prophecy is like a radio beacon that if you perfect your intellect, then your soul is refined, your intellect is refined, that it can pick up these prophetic messages. And then you can sort of share them. But it's sort of like this constant, like broadcast. And presumably for Rambam, I would imagine the words are the composition of the prophet, because the message is some distillation of truth that you've refined your character, you've refined your intellect to perceive, and then in your own language you get to share that. That's probably not shot, right? In a lot of these, it seems that it was against their will. It seems they weren't necessarily very learned and sophisticated people. Yirmiyahu started prophesying as a young age, right? It doesn't seem that it was. The Rambam's theory works within his philosophical understanding. It doesn't necessarily accord with the pshat of much of Tanakh, where prophecy seems like something unwanted that can overtake a prophet. But again, what's the... If the message wasn't heeded, what's the purpose? I've been sort of thinking about this as I was thinking about. I don't have a good answer. It could be. It's like sort of an enduring record of preservation of truth, even though he's going to be right. He's not going to be successful. Yerushalayim will be destroyed. The people go into exile because they didn't listen to what he had to say.
This time he wouldn't be successful.
Right, but ultimately we know what he said, and so we now have recourse. We can do things better. Because we have recourse to his words. So what do we do when the Haftorah is read? People sneak out and they drink, because I think it's a way to, my theory, Kiddush Club, it's a way to overcome the cognitive dissonance that's inherent. And if we actually listen to the rebuke of the prophets, we would have to reevaluate our lives in some significant ways. So instead we sneak out and drink, so we don't have to confront the prophets. So Yirmiyahu gives us where he speaks in the Beit HaMikdash. priests, the prophets, and all the people heard Yirmiyahu speaking these words in the house of the Lord. And when Yirmiyahu finished speaking all that the Lord had commanded him to speak to all the people, the priests and the prophets and all the people ceased their shouting, "You shall die! How dare you prophesy in the name of the Lord that this house shall become like Shiloh, and this city be made desolate without inhabitants?" And all the people crowded about Yirmiyahu in the house of the Lord. He nearly was killed. He wasn't killed. There's a whole dramatic intervention there. In that episode, he did not get killed. People spoke up on his behalf. It seems that there was this tradition that you let the prophet speak. That is like a role. You let the crazy man. You have let him yell things in the street corner. But he was saying very destabilizing things. So you can just think about. You could have to name. You think of people or saying things that are really unpopular because they're against everything we hold sacred, and they're traitorous, right? This city will be destroyed. It's going to be like Shiloh, like it's. The city of our enemy, right? That's not Yerushalayim. That's not the Beit Midrash. How could you let that happen? But again, look at chapter 7. Also, chapter 26 and chapter 7 both seem to be about the same episode. We talked about last time that the order in which the chapters appear in the book of Yirmiyahu are not the order in which things happen. So you have some little detective work to reconstruct in chronological order. I relied on Rabbi Lau's, really wonderful book for this. So chapter 7, same moment. See, you are relying on illusions that are of no avail. Will you steal and murder and commit adultery and swear falsely and sacrifice to Baal and follow other gods whom you have not experienced, and then come and stand before me in this house which bears my name and say, "We are safe"? To do all these important things, do you consider this house which bears my name to be a den of thieves? Hama'arat haritzim hayabayit hazeh. Do you think it's a den of thieves? As for me, I have been watching, declares the Lord. Okay, so don't think you can get away with all this wicked behavior because you come to the Beit HaMikdash. Okay? Don't think you can, commit Medicare fraud and then make a big donation, and get your name in the yeshiva, and that's okay. Don't think there's anything special about being Jewish that's going to protect you. That you come to shul, it's going to protect you if your life is fundamentally a life of theft and oppression and bloodshed. Being from is not going to save you. That's what Yirmiyahu is saying. He was against being from. He was in favor of having living integrity and following mitzvot and being obedient to God, but not the frumkeit exemplified by the Beit HaMikdash. That's not going to save you. And it angers God that people flock to the Beit HaMikdash when it doesn't, when their lives are not godly. Because it's almost worse, because somebody's a vulgar, good for nothing, but he knows I'm a vulgar good for nothing. Okay, so that's a shame that some people live that way, but that's his life, that's his choices. He's not pretending to be anything he's not. But somebody who is a vulgar, oppressive, right, rotten scoundrel, but comes to the Beit HaMikdash and thinks that he's so from, like that's a desecration of God's name. And that's much worse on a theological level. So what happened then? Okay, the priests and the prophets said to the officials and all the people, "This man deserves the death penalty. For he has prophesied against this city, as you yourselves have heard." Jeremiah said to the officials and all the people, "It was the Lord who sent me to prophesy against this house and this city, all the words you heard. Therefore mend your ways and your acts and heed the Lord your God, that the Lord may renounce the punishment he has decreed for you." Okay, I'm just the messenger. Don't blame the messenger. As for me, I am in your hands. Do to me what seems good and right. But no, if you put me to death, you and this city and its inhabitants will be guilty of shedding the blood of an innocent man. For in truth the Lord has sent me to you to speak all these words to you. Then the officials and all the people said to the priests and the prophets, "This man does not deserve the death penalty, for he spoke to us in the name of the Lord our God." So they at the last minute they stopped themselves, and Yirmiyahu lives. But they wanted to kill him, right? Again, you can imagine, you can all think of what message it might be that would be so destabilizing that you'd be like, "This guy, get him out of here, get him out of here." Which doesn't mean that everyone who says things that are really upsetting, we say get out of here, doesn't mean they're all right. Okay, it just means, but I'm trying to help you understand what that anger that he and the fear that Yirmiyahu is arousing. So what happened next? 605. Nebuchadnezzar becomes emperor of Babylonia. He defeats the Egyptians at Carchemish. Just look at the map. You can see Carchemish is in between Babylonia and Assyria. It's what like I can't tell if it's Syria or if it's in Iraq, but it's that basic area. And then he begins to march south to push the Egyptians out again. Right, Egypt. Egypt is. Where Babylonia and Syria are, and Eretz Yisrael is in the middle. So that sort of goes back, and you can't get to one without going through Eretz Yisrael, and so that's where the fighting is. So 604, the Babylonians capture Ashkelon. Ashkelon is, it's a big, was a very important coastal city. It's still is a coastal city. It's north of Gaza, along the coast. Okay, so that was like once the Egyptians were pushed out of Ashkelon, they were sort of basically pushed all the way back to Egypt. And this is very frightening because Judah is an Egyptian province. Yehoiakim is an Egyptian vassal. Okay, so now that his patriarch, he'd been relying on Egypt, and that's proven to be, like not a worthless, like not it's been a problem for him, right? Because his patron is now in trouble. So it seems that everyone is fasting, and that's Jeremiah chapter 4. There's a call for fasting. Let's Yirmiyahu was kind of sort of, let's say not enjoying, but he's kind of relishing in this moment. I'm relishing. He's expressing the moment that like, okay, now there's like real fear. Now there's things are unsettled. Okay, so let's look what happens. Like chapter 25. So this is this moment. This is chapter 25 and 26. Let's see. Do this to me. Yeah, look at 25 chapter. So, a lot of the some of the early Zionist thinkers were had a very negative view of Yirmiyahu. They felt he was defeatist and he was traitorous and didn't believe in Jewish independence. Ben Gurion liked Yirmiyahu. We thought everything he did was motivated by Ahavat Yisrael. He loved his people, and he just he's realistic. He recognized that when Egypt and Babylonia are fighting, there's nothing for Yerushalayim to do other than just lay low and just try to avoid being involved and just be loyal to whomever happens to be king at the time. Because what happened is that the Egyptian, after being pushed out in 604 BCE, 601 to 598 is a 3-year Egyptian recovery, and that gets Yehoiakim in trouble because he Nebuchadnezzar comes down from Ashkelon, comes from the coast up to Jerusalem, conquers Lachish, which I think there's still remains of that battle, is on his way to Yerushalayim, and then he turns back because the Egyptians, I think, attacked it up north on the coast by Tyre and Lebanon, and Nebuchadnezzar diverts his army to go up north. And then the Egyptians have a bit of a comeback. So a few years later. So there's like a reprieve of the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem. And Yehoiakim endures in his belief that if he's loyal to Egypt, that's his way to succeed. And so he doesn't. Yirmiyahu was saying, look, Egypt's not going to save you. Nebuchadnezzar is the servant of God. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar is going to win. Submit to him. Don't, and if you want, your only chance is to rule your kingdom with justice, not to be an ally of Egypt. That's Yirmiyahu's message. But because the Egyptians have like this counterattack, and Nebuchadnezzar is diverted from Jerusalem in 604, then Yehoiakim, again, he's confirmed in his belief that Egypt can be a source of his strength. So, chapter 25, from the 13th year of King Josiah, from the 13th year of Yoshiyahu, son of Ammon of Judah, to this day, these 23 years, this is Jeremiah summing up the first 23 years of his career. Okay, he was young when he started prophesying, so he was in his 30s. This was not an old person. For these 23 years, the word of the Lord has come to me. I have spoken to you persistently, but you would not listen. Moreover, the Lord constantly sent all his servants, the prophets, to you, but you would not listen or incline your ear to hear. That when they said, turn back every one from your evil ways and your wicked acts, that you may remain throughout the ages on the soil which the Lord gave to you and your fathers. Do not follow other gods to serve and worship them. Do not vex me with your own hands have made, and I will not bring disaster upon you. But you would not listen to me, declares the Lord, but vexed me with what your hands have made to your own hurt. Idols, okay? Assuredly, thus said the Lord of hosts, because you wouldn't listen to my words, I'm going to send for all the peoples of the north, declares the Lord, for my servant King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. Isn't that interesting that he calls him Avdi? Okay, we have Nebuchadnezzar, Melech Bavel, Avdi, my servant. Avdi, who is called the Eved of Hashem in the Torah? Yeah. So who else? Nebuchadnezzar is the Eved, right? That's a very right. I mean, that's like, can you imagine someone saying such a thing? Nebuchadnezzar, this every entire city is terrified of Nebuchadnezzar. He conquered Ashkelon. He's pushed the Egyptians out of Palestine. He turned towards Jerusalem, making his way up the coastal, up the Shvela, and he's conquered Lachish. And he's like a week away from Yerushalayim. People are fasting. People are terrified. And Yirmiyahu gets up and says, Nebuchadnezzar Aved, he's the Eved of Hashem. He's God's servant. He's God's messenger to punish. Very, very destabilizing thing to say. This whole land, verse 11, shall be a desolate ruin, and those nations will serve the king of Babylon 70 years. When the 70 years are over, I'll punish the king of Babylon and that nation and the land of the Chaldeans for their sins, declares the Lord, and I will make it a desolation for all time. So here, Jeremiah is saying, as Nebuchadnezzar comes to the throne, as he comes into the region, Yirmiyahu says he's my servant, and he says, but he's going to be victorious ultimately. He'll lay desolation to the land, but only for 70 years, which is ultimately what happened. But that's all laid out at the beginning. Again, to see something happening and not be able to stop it is really, really a terrible thing. It's like that line, I'm trying to think. It's some quip. Those who don't learn history are condemned to repeat it. But what about those who do know history, but they can't stop it from others from repeating it? Right? That's he knows what's going to happen. Okay, but he can't convince others to do what's right. So so chapter 36, of all of chapter 36, we're not going to read the whole thing. It's a very, very dramatic story.
Wait, so you got it exactly right?
70 years was 70 years. Yes. Impressive, right? Kind of prophetic.
Literally. And so the academic position on this is that he was speaking of events that were going to happen in the future.
I don't know. Maybe they would say it was written later. Maybe they would say it wasn't exactly 70 years. I don't know. I actually don't know what they would say about this. Like how. You could check. You could look at the Anchor Bible too. I'm not sure. Chapter 36 is sort of here because it's so fourth year of King Jehoiakim. Just to remind, that would be he became king. Remind us in 609. So 4 years later is 605. Right? That's the year when Nebuchadnezzar makes his first march. So this is again when everyone is terrified. So Yirmiyahu then is told, take a scroll and write upon it all the words that I have spoken to you concerning Israel and Judah and all the nations from the time I first spoke to you in the days of Yoshiyahu to this day. So God tells him, okay, take everything so far, take the first half of your prophetic career, write it all down. And perhaps it's going to work. So he goes to Baruch ben Neriah, and Baruch ben Neriah writes a scroll at Yirmiyahu's dictation, all the words which the Lord had spoken to him. So this is I think it's kind of cool. Baruch ben Neriah, so he's the scribe, of Yirmiyahu. And in those days, they used to, they had seals, roll up a scroll, you put wax or something on it, you would take a piece of metal or I guess a carved stone or something, a signet, right, a ring, and you would put the seal in it to say that way the person who got it would know it hadn't been tampered with, and you would have your seal on it, they would know who it was from. So there are many, many, many ancient seals that have been found, not the wax part, but the metal thing for stamping into the seal. So if in the Israel Museum, in Yerushalayim, they have a case of ancient seals, including one with the name Baruch ben Neriah. So maybe it was a common name in a lot of Baruch ben Neriahs, or maybe it was that was the seal of Yirmiyahu's scribe, which is pretty cool to think about. Sometimes they get really extravagant with these things. That, I don't know if you've ever been along the Sea of Galilee. They have something called the Jesus boat. I don't know if you ever, it's a boat from the time of Jesus that it's sort of sunk in the Yam Kinneret, and it was covered by mud very quickly in what do you call it, an oxygen-free environment, so it didn't decompose because it was buried very quickly in muck, and it was excavated, I think, during a drought. When the water level came so low, they found it, and they were able to get it out of the mud and preserve it and keep it from just, as soon as usually it was exposed to air, it would decompose very, very quickly. Somehow they were able to preserve it. So it's a boat from a 2,000-year-old fishing boat. So that's cool, but they called it the Jesus boat, and they have pilgrims from all over the world coming to see this boat because they say maybe this was the boat of Jesus. Because all those stories in the New Testament out there on the boat and they're fishing, and all those, a lot of the apostles were fishermen, and so and so maybe this was the boat. It's like a big pilgrim. So it's like a clever Jewish trick, to term something. It's a significant argument. Why am I saying? Okay, so that no one's done that yet with this seal of Baruch ben Neriah, but maybe they could. Okay, and say this is, but they wouldn't, because this is sort of a negative. It's very unhappy. The sort of story has not a happy ending. So Yirmiyah says, I'm in hiding. I can't go. I can't deliver. This is to your question, Shalom. Once at some point, he's like persona non grata. No one's listening to Yirmiyahu anymore. So he has Baruch ben Neriah write it out, and you can deliver it. Okay, so the 9th month of the 5th year of King Hoyakim. The 9th month is Tammuz. 7th month is Tishrei. 8th month is Mar Cheshvan. 9th month is Kislev, right? So 5th year of King Hoyakim, that's 605, right? Son of Josiah, all the people of Jerusalem, and all the people proclaimed a fast before the Lord in Jerusalem. They didn't know why they came a fast. They proclaimed a fast because Nebuchadnezzar has conquered Lachish and he's on the march. It was then that Baruch, in the chamber of Gemariah, son of Shaphan, the scribe in the upper court near the new gateway of the house of the Lord, read the words of Yirmiyahu from the scroll to all the people. So he reads this in the Beit Midrash on a fast day when everyone is terrified. And everyone hears, and they say, let's go to the king's palace. Let's try to get this to the king. The king really needs to take the scroll. Baruch comes with them. They go read it to us, and they heard it. Hey, we got to report this to the king. Verse 16, when they heard all these words, they turned to each other in fear, and they said to Baruch, we must report all this to the king. And they questioned Baruch. Verse 17, tell us how. And he said, Yirmiyahu recited these words, and I wrote it down, ink on the scroll. They say, you go into hiding, but don't tell anyone where you are. We'll go to the king. The king sent Yehudi to get the scroll. He fetched it. Since it was the 9th month, the king was sitting in the winter house with a fire burning in the brazier. You know what a brazier is? Anyone know? Something like that, yeah. In Hebrew it would say, "V'melech yoshev beit hachoref b'chodesh haTishi v'yata'ach lefanav mevu'eret." Some little thing, burning thing, like a little. Okay, so I don't know if you've been to Yerushalayim in the winter. It's like bitter cold. In a way, it's not as cold as Chicago on the thermometer, but it feels much colder because people don't have clothing that's as warm. Okay, so and the wind, just the hills, right? You come out of a building on a Kislev night in Yerushalayim, and bitter cold, and the winds and the rain. Okay, and everyone's fasting because they're terrified because the Nebuchadnezzar and Yehoiakim, he's in his winter palace, warming himself by the fire. He's comfortable. He's not disturbed. He's totally detached from the people, from their fears, from their concerns. And every time he read 3 or 4 columns, the king would cut it with a scribe's knife and throw it into the fire until the entire scroll was consumed by the fire in the brazier. Yet the king and all his courtiers who heard all these words showed no fear and did not tear their garments. It says, arrest the scribe. The word of the Lord came to Yirmiyahu and said, okay, he burned your scroll, get yourself another scroll, write upon all the other things around the first scroll. And concerning King Jehoiakim, king of Judah, you shall say, thus the Lord, you burned the scroll, saying, how dare you write it in that the king of Babylon will come and destroy this land and cause man and beast to cease from it? Assuredly, thus said the Lord concerning King Jehoiakim of Judah, he shall not have any of his line sitting on the throne of David, and his own corpse shall be left exposed to the heat by day and the cold by night, and I will punish him and his offspring and his courtiers for their iniquity. I will bring on them and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem and all the men of Judah, all the disasters of which I've warned them, that they would not listen. So Jeremiah got another scroll and gave it to the scribe Baruch, son of Neriah, and Yirmiyahu's dictation he wrote in the whole text of the scroll that King Jehoiakim of Judah had burned, and more of the like was added. So that's the second version, okay? What we have is the second version of Sefer Yirmiyahu after the first version was burned. What a scene, right? Of such a real callousness. So what happens? 601 to 598, the Egyptians, again, they kind of return to Palestine. 598, the Babylonians return to Judah, and they remove Jehoiakim, and they, and he's done. And they take Yechoniah as a prisoner. Okay, that's second. We'll read 2 Kings 24. See what happens next. Okay. In his days, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came up, and Jehoiakim became his vassal for 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him. The Lord let loose against him the raiding bands of the Chaldeans, Arameans, Moabites, and Ammonites. He let them loose against Judah to destroy it according to the word that the Lord had spoken through his servants, the prophets. All this befell Judah at the command of the Lord, who banished them in his presence because of the sins that Manasseh had committed, the grandfather, and also was the blood of the innocent that he shed, for he filled Jerusalem with the blood of the innocents, and the Lord would not forgive. And the other events of Jehoiakim's reign and all of his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Judah. Jehoiakim slept with his fathers, and his son Jehoiachin succeeded him as king. Okay, so this is different. It seems that according to 2 Kings, Jehoiakim actually died in peace and was buried, not left, exposed as Yirmiyahu had prophesied. It seems he dies peacefully, and his son Jehoiachin became king in the midst of this rebellion. Okay, the Egyptians come back, Jehoiakim goes back to his Egyptian, sponsor, patron. Then the Babylonians return, and that's it. That's a big problem and they lay waste to Judah. Jehoiakim, maybe he dies somehow in this time. It seems that he's buried. Jehoiachin is in charge now. The king of Egypt did not venture out of his country again, for the king of Babylon had seized all the land that had belonged to the king of Egypt, from the Wadi of Egypt to the river of Euphrates. So Egypt's out of the picture. Babylonia is dominant. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. That's it. 3 months. Very short, very, very short reign. His mother's name was Nehushta. Okay, he was displeasing to the Lord. At that time, the troops of King Nebuchadnezzar, verse 10, of Babylon marched against Jerusalem, and the city came under siege. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon advanced against the city while his troops were besieging it. Thereupon, King Jehoiachin of Judah, along with his mother and his courtiers, commanders, and officers, surrendered to the king of Babylon. The king of Babylon took him captive in the 8th year of his reign. He carried off from Jerusalem all the treasures of the house of the Lord and the treasures of the royal palace. He stripped off all the golden decorations in the temple of the Lord which King Solomon of Israel had made. As the Lord had warned, he exiled all of Jerusalem, all the commanders, all the warriors. He deported Jehoiachin to Babylon and the king's wives and officers, etc. Verse 17, the king of Babylon appointed Mattaniah, Jehoiachin's uncle, king in his place, changing his name to Tzidkiah. So again, you have the same dynamic of an emperor coming in, putting another brother in place. These are all children of Yoshiahu, are put on the throne, and the name is changed to signify, again, you're my person, you're my vassal, I'm in charge. So Jehoiachin is taken into captivity. This is like the good exile. This was the elite, this was the nobility, the king, the royal family. They all go into exile in Babylonia, and eventually they do okay in Babylonia. This is like the elites. Like all of the elites are sort of living together in Babylonia. And who's left? Tzidkiyahu, the last brother, and the rest of the population. Yirmiyahu stays in Yerushalayim. Yechezkel is a prophet at the same time. He's in Babylonia. And so we have messages that Yirmiyahu sent from Jerusalem to the exile that was already in Babylonia. So there were like two Jewish communities. There are the ones who are living well in Babylonia, and there's the lepers left behind in Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim. Yirmiyahu is sending messages to Babylonia. Yechezkel is prophesying from Babylonia, looking at events in Eretz Yisrael, also prophesying about events in Babylonia. It seems the Babylonians were confused. Some felt, well, now that we're in Babylonia, should we be Jewish anymore? And some felt, well, really, let's try to return to Eretz Yisrael. And Yechezkel, no, stay here for the time being. And you still have to worship God. You have to be faithful to God. This middle ground that you still have to be faithful to the Torah, even in Babylonia. But you can't rebuild the Beit HaMikdash in Babylonia either. But you still have to follow the Torah. That's Yechezkel's mission to kind of clarify that. And Yirmiyahu says the same thing in chapter 29. Bless the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to the whole community whom I exiled from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their fruit. Take wives and beget sons and daughters. And take wives for your sons and give your daughters to husbands, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there, do not decrease. And seek the welfare of the city to which I have exiled you. And praise the Lord in its behalf. For in its prosperity you shall prosper. Be loyal, Babylonians. Pray on behalf of the city where you live. Because you're going to be, if they do well, you'll do well. Have children settle in where you are. This is Yirmiyahu before the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash to that group of Jews who were exiled with Yehoiachin, with that first king. He ruled 3 months, and then the rest of his life he's with his chevra in Babylonia.
What of the character of the people at this time? Was the corruption repressed or was it perpetuated?
I mean, the things did not really get better. Ultimately, how can you sort of summarize? So let's just 597. Tzidkiyahu becomes king. Okay, that's the exile again. The exile of 590 Kislev, 598. They remove Yehoiakim. Yehoiakim is dead. Yechoniah rules for a few months. He's taken in captivity. Tzidkiyahu becomes king. Could be the same age as Yechoniah, because Yechoniah was his nephew, but Tzidkiyahu was I think the youngest of the brothers, so they could have been very similar in age. 594. There's a regional summit of some of the nations to kind of maybe we can rebel against Babylonia. 592. There's a new pharaoh comes on the scene, Apries, and he tries to return to, restore the Egyptian kingdom. And Tzidkiyahu is tempted, like my brother was an Egyptian, loyal Egyptian, and he rebels against his patron. Again, this is what Yirmiyahu was really. Don't try to play these games. Just stay out of it. Don't try to, get involved in these battling empires. Don't rely on Egypt. But Tzidkiyahu tries to ally with Egypt, and in 588, Nebuchadnezzar launches this reprisal. It took a while. How would you rebel? You just rebel by you don't pay your taxes, right? Every year, the vassal king would pay taxes to the emperor. So, Tzidkiyahu owed a certain amount of silver to Babylonia every year. So if he didn't pay it, maybe he's late. Maybe it's coming. Oh, it's not late. You didn't pay this year. It's going to be next year. It takes a while till he realizes an actual rebellion that he's paying his taxes instead to Egypt. And so 588, Nebuchadnezzar gets his act together. He's going to launch a reprisal raid and besieges Jerusalem in the end of 588. By 586 is the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash. In terms of corruption, the people's, so one, Tzidkiyahu is still rejecting Yirmiyahu's advice because he's rebelling against Babylonia, and Yirmiyahu thinks, no, Babylonia, like Nebuchadnezzar, he's the Eved Hashem. Like God sent him to destroy Jerusalem and punish Judah, and you're rebelling against him. Just don't do that. So that's one thing he didn't do. They freed their slaves. It seems to get them to enlist them in the army. And then after the fighting was over, they re-enslaved them. So that was pretty bad. That was a really negative thing that they did. And so it wasn't the type of obedience that Yirmiyahu was calling for.
And it wasn't that he was advocating staying and developing Babylonia because that was the more appropriate behavior in that community?
That's interesting. I mean, that's interesting as opposed to, so after the destruction, there are groups that flee to Egypt. And Yirmiyahu goes with them for a time, but in Egypt it seems that they are much more assimilated and they're worshipping idols there, so he leaves Egypt at the very end. We're sort of running out of time. I know it's sort of already after, it's like almost 10 after 9. So the final dramatic episode is the assassination of Gedaliah. After the destruction of the temple, the Babylonians put Gedaliah in charge and said, you gather everyone here and, kind of run things for us. And Gedaliah is assassinated by somebody who thinks that he's, again, a traitor, someone who's loyal to Egypt, somebody who, and that's sort of like, things get even worse, right? Even after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, when Gedaliah is assassinated, things get even worse, and that's when this whole group flees to Egypt, and it's terrible, terrible things happen there. That's sort of Tzom Gedaliah is in commemoration of this fellow Gedaliah who was assassinated exactly by a, exactly. Jeremiah was actually in prison, right? The king, chapter 38, Tzidkiyahu comes to him just before the destruction, says, what should I do? And Jeremiah says, just surrender, okay? Surrender to the Babylonians. And he doesn't, and they keep him, he's in prison. Jeremiah's in prison. That's where they find him when the Babylonians destroy Jerusalem. Jeremiah was in prison. So he lives a while afterwards. He ends up, after Egypt, it's unclear what happens to where he dies exactly. But, it's a defeated person. To see something that you can't stop, right? And that loneliness of knowing that your people whom you love are headed for a disaster, and you know it, and you say it, and you can't stop it. You don't feel satisfied when the destruction comes. I think did you feel like a successful prophet? I don't know. Maybe everything he's prophesied happened, right?
But I feel vindicated, but he is a higher level tzaddik, so he must be.
If it was me, I feel vindicated. I say, you're right. I don't think he feels. I think he feels maybe as a failure that he couldn't convince them, that his words couldn't penetrate, right? And then what's the purpose? What's the purpose of prophecy? Why does God send these prophets with these beautiful words, these unmediated, this like language of God, and they don't impact people?
You know, the one successful prophet, unless you count Shmuel, who prophesied to non-Jews, was sorry that he prophesied and succeeded.
Yes, that's right. He did succeed. He didn't want to succeed. Yeah. It's the other. There's just to Yehoiachin, the exiled. Eventually he's. The Babylonians realize, oh, this guy is kind of important. We should let's let him out of prison. Let's give him a nice. A stipend, and treat. It's sort of nice to have a king living amongst us. And ultimately, his grandson is Zerubbabel, who goes back to Jerusalem and rebuilds Jerusalem before vanishing under mysterious circumstances. But that, it's Yehoiachin as the parent or the grandparent of Zerubbabel is the one whom that line continues in, not the other brothers. Value of the prophetic message. Again, the record is preserved so that ultimately we know we have that divine perspective on events, even if the people who were supposed to hear it weren't able to or chose not to pay attention, hear the words. Ultimately, God's relationship with the Jewish people shifted, and the prophetic moment ends, right? And at the time, 70 years later, when everyone goes back to Eretz Yisrael, that's the end of the prophetic period. Zechariah, Malachi, and the other one, whatever you say, Zechariah, Malachi, and one other, the last of the prophets, right as the Jewish people return to Eretz Yisrael, and then that stage ends, and then what rises ultimately is the sage, the scholar, the rabbi. The Gemara says, Chacham adif min avi, that a scholar is somehow greater than a prophet, and they ultimately were more successful, right? The prophets couldn't control the people's behavior, couldn't get them to change their ways, and ultimately the Chachamim were able to earn the obedience and of the Jewish people in an enduring way that up until this very day, in a way the prophets were never able to do. And so it's something interesting to contemplate. Why is the Torah scholarship and the legal sophistication, the legislation of the Chacham, why is that more enduring, and why does that create obedience in a way that the prophets were not able to do? That being said, the message of the prophets, I think, again, it's still enduring. Ultimately, we haven't fully internalized, fully listened. All the things that Yirmiyahu, the hypocrisy and the oppression and the thinking that God will never destroy God's own house, right? And the religious obedience can make up for ethical lapses. Those mistakes are still alive and well and flourishing amongst us, and ultimately that's a message we still have to heed from all the Nevi'im. So I think we'll pause now. It's a lot more that we can get to, but that's also means a lot more for further study and discussion. And thank you so much for joining us.